What makes an ancient coin collection truly special? Not just an individual coin, but the entire thing, the entirety of the collection as a whole. Today, we're joined by the Colosseo Collection, and I'm showing you what a world-class ancient coins collection looks like. So, to begin, we need to ask ourselves what constitutes a world-class collection, an exceptional collection. For me, an exceptional collection has, of course, coins of remarkable aesthetic beauty, not necessarily in its overall state of conservation, but definitely in the dies for the coins being made by the very best artists that made a certain type of coin. An exceptional collection also has coins with meaning. I mean, every coin communicates the official message of the state that issued it, but certain special coins give entire speeches on their own. Speeches that proclaim the power of a certain imperial dynasty, of an important moment in a people's history, maybe a key moment in a leader's life. It might even be a coin that communicates a people's moments of desperation. And once you gather a group of these coins together, you truly see the opera of civilization's history unfolding right in front of your eyes. It's a spectacular sight. An exceptional collection takes into consideration that a coin has had two lives, one in ancient times when it was money, when it was propaganda, and the second life as an object of collection, as a historical object. Sometimes the people who own the coin before its current owner, the contributions a certain coin has made to our modern knowledge of history, who owned this coin in modern times, can be as fascinating as a coin's old life. Many of our coins were once owned by aristocrats, clergymen, academics, even political leaders. And finally, an exceptional collection isn't just one with the biggest budget. It helps to have the means to acquire important coins, but I'm pretty sure you've seen a lot of people with lots of money and terrible taste. However, when someone truly passionate about coins, who does his research, also has the means to acquire the right coins and put together the right sets, the result is just splendid. Hopefully in the near future I'll manage to get some footage of these coins so we can see them all in their glory on video format. But today, let's have a look at the Colosseo Collection, coin by coin, picture by picture, and have a chat. Let's see what makes these coins special, some of the interesting facts about it, and maybe, I don't know, draw some inspiration when assembling our own collections. Now, there's a lot to cover. His collection is quite large and is divided between Greek and Roman pieces, so today I'm going to focus on the Roman part, and I'll make a separate video on his Greek coins. Alright, enough talk, let's get to some coins. And we start really strong with an Aidmar denarius. This is probably one of the most important, if not the most important Roman coin ever struck, because it marked the final inevitable transition between the Roman Republic to what would become the Roman Empire. So this coin was struck by Brutus, one of the conspirators who killed Julius Caesar in 44 BC. So this coin was struck in 43 BC when a civil war broke out between the conspirators against Caesar and Octavian, Mark Antony, and the allies of Caesar. So on the obverse we have the portrait of Brutus, which was in itself a very important political statement. Let's remember that 1 year prior, in 44 BC, Julius Caesar himself was the first one to dare put his image on a Roman coin. Like the image of a living Roman on a coin was something unheard of. It was a very bold, I would say reckless political move. The coins were the space of the gods. It was not something for mortals to advertise themselves in. So here we have the portrait of Brutus. If Caesar opened the floodgates, he would capitalize on this new propaganda tool as well. So there he was. And we have Brutus Imperator, Brutus, commander of troops. Very clear message of strength, of military power. Underneath, we have the name of the moneyer, Lucius Praetorinus Questianus. This was the magistrate, the official responsible for the issuing and the distribution of these coins. And on the reverse, probably the most important part of the design, at the center we have the liberty cap. This was a cap given to slaves when they were freed by their masters. So this was a symbol of the Roman people being freed by these conspirators. And how were they freed from Caesar's oppression? By force, by murder. And there he puts the 2 daggers used to kill Caesar. Such an explicit show of political violence. Imagine something like that nowadays. It would be crazy. And underneath, the day when they did it. Aedibus Martius, the Ides of March, the 15th of March, the middle of March. Incredible. Such an incredible coin and such a way to start this collection. Now, of course, the assassination of Julius Caesar couldn't go unpunished. So the next coin is an aureus, a gold piece, struck by his adoptive son, Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus. This is a piece struck under Octavian's troops as during the time he reconciled with Lepidus and Mark Antony to make the second triumvirate and fight against the killers of Caesar. And as we can see over here, this is a coin where on one side, actually on the reverse, we have this very young portrait of Octavian, although it's a little bit crude because this was struck at a military mint, but we see the portrait of the young future first emperor of Rome, the legends, the same name as Julius Caesar. That's interesting because he assumed Julius Caesar's name, so we have Caius Caesar as well, and Pontifex, and probably down here he was also calling himself consul because he was elected for the consulship. And on the obverse, we have the bust of Caesar. We have the bust of Caesar with the titles that he held when he was assassinated. So we have Caius Caesar, Dictator Perpetuo, so perpetual dictator for life, Pontifex Maximus, chief priest of Rome. An amazing coin, which probably was the kind of coin used to pay for important officers or maybe even generals in the fights against the killers of Caesar. So after Caesar was avenged, there was not really a power vacuum, but it was pretty much a matter of time until the triumvirate turned on itself. So Lepidus was quickly brushed aside, and the real dispute for who was going to rule the future Roman Empire was between Octavian, that we've seen previously, and this gentleman over here, Mark Antony, the most experienced of the two. Actually, Mark Antony had everything to be the first emperor of Rome, but Octavian was just too smart and he managed to outmaneuver Mark Antony. And Mark Antony did have some serious political and especially strategic blunders. And I think one of them was to fall for that lady that we have over here to the left, Cleopatra of Egypt, the last of the Ptolemies. So this was a denarius probably struck at either one of their military mints or around the eastern part of the empire, which Antony ruled. And as we can see, they are shown in equal majesty. We have Antony over here with the typical, like a very austere portrait, and we have Cleopatra with the royal headband, a symbol of royalty. So this is definitely a show of them two being equals. This was a very important statement. This coin was probably struck around the year 32, so the tensions between Octavian and Mark Antony were already in the point of eruption, really. And it was a matter of time until they would come to clashes in the Battle of Actium, and Octavian would become the first emperor. Which leads us to this wonderful aureus of Octavian. So far, we still can't talk about an Augustus, an Emperor Augustus. He was still Octavian, since this coin was probably struck around 32, 31 BC, so before he actually assumed this title. And as we can see, he still uses his title he inherited from Caesar. So we have Caesar, and then we have Divi Filius, the son of a god. So he still keeps pushing that agenda of the deified Julius Caesar. He's the son of a god. He's the son of that incredible man that everyone liked. And I love the design of this coin. It's so incredibly clean. Octavian is leaving a very clear message. You don't see like these complicated legends like you see in later imperial coins. It's just his face. He's the man of the hour. He's over here on horseback saluting the crowd. And it's very likely that coins such as this one, this was struck at Rome, but very likely it was issued to once again pay officials and high-ranking officers and generals in preparation for the battle. Because the aureus is typically an imperial denomination. It wasn't really introduced until Augustus's monetary reforms around the 20s BC. So this is an exceptional issue, probably issued to pay high-ranking officers prior to the battle. So it's a very important coin imbued with a lot of significance. Like, it was the turning point. It was the time for that big battle. It's a coin that would carry a lot of anticipation in it. You know, it was like, if you receive this coin from the treasury of Octavian, it would be like, this is it. I picked my side, and now it's time to decide the fate of Rome. It's incredible to have such a coin. And here we see how this collection connects the dots and tells a story so in such a wonderful way. So the previous aureus was the coin right before the battle, so it was a coin of a time of anticipation before the battle. Over here we have a denarius issued to celebrate his victory. He won. He is the undisputed leader of the Roman world. He wasn't still Augustus, but as you can see on the reverse, there's a triumphal arch. Octavian is celebrating a triumph. He has triumph over Cleopatra, over Mark Antony. He's the uncontested leader of the Roman world. We can see him at the top of the arch, probably a statue of him. This arch hasn't survived to our days. And there would have been this wonderful statue of him with a quadriga. Typically, the gods were the ones who had the right to ride these chariots with 4 horses. So he is almost like connecting himself to a deified figure, a larger-than-life figure. And we will see this tendency, this kind of special image of the emperor reflected in basically the coinage of the entire imperial period. This is the kind of coin that will set up the basis for all of the numismatic legacy of Rome throughout the imperial period. Another very important, very impressive coin. As a coin itself, it is very impressive. Check out the details. This coin is basically untouched. I mean, we have some very gentle wear on the high points, but especially in the portrait of Octavian, it is impressive. Every hair strand, we see his face is all still very, very well made and full of. It looks like it's a coin of pretty high relief. We can still see his relatively young features. He was very young when he beat Antony. No one was expecting such a young guy to beat Antony. And this is the portrait that he will use for the rest of his reign. Even when he was like, there are coin issues like 2 years before he died, and he still has this portrait, this like larger than life image, figure of an emperor, always fresh, always young. Now, let's not forget that Octavian did not only defeat Antony, he also defeated Cleopatra, which means he finally annexed the rich and very important kingdom of Egypt. And this is one of such denarii. This issue, it's roughly around the year 30, 27 BC. And as we can see on the reverse, it celebrates the conquest of Egypt. It reads Egypto capta. And we have at the center a symbolic animal of Egypt. So we have this incredible crocodile. It's so charming. There are other symbols of Egypt that are also shown on coins, typically a hippo, but in this case it's the crocodile, and it's made in such lovely detail. And over here we once again have this very young, very fresh bust of Octavian. We once again have Caesar, and he's now advertising he's a little bit more experienced in civic matters as well. He's gaining experience. He always, in the beginning of his public career, he always wanted to make a point that despite his young age, he was a good politician. He was someone the Roman people so used to venerating and respecting older people, the elderly, that he was supposed to be respected. So here we can see consul for the 6th year. So showing, hey, I've had 6 tenures as a consul. I am a reliable leader everyone can count on. And I've just conquered Egypt. Don't mess with me, because I'm going to send the crocodile to eat you. Incredible coin. It's amazing coin after amazing coin in this collection. This next denarius was struck at around 20 BC. So now we can properly talk about Emperor Augustus, not just Octavian. And apart from defeating Antony and Cleopatra, it is true that Augustus expanded the territory of the empire quite a lot. So here we have one of such examples. This is a denarius that celebrates Roman intervention in Armenia. Armenia, the kingdom of Armenia, was always a buffer state between the powerhouse that were the Romans and the Parthians to the east, in the area of the Middle East. So whoever controlled, there was like a back and forth of who controlled Armenia and who put their king into the throne of this land. So whoever controlled the king of Armenia sort of like had the upper hand in this dynamic between Parthians and Persians and Romans. So in this case, Augustus celebrates that he managed to capture Armenia, to subdue Armenia, and to align it with Roman interests. So a part of once again, the expression Armenia capta, the capture of Armenia, we also have some symbols. And the symbols on the coin also are there to represent Armenia, right? So the typical weapons used by the Armenians and the peoples in this area of the steppes. So we have a couple of quivers where they would store bows. It was the land of archers. And over here we have the tiara, kind of headband, a kind of crown worn by the Armenian king. Wonderful example of foreign intervention on the part of the Romans propagandized on coins, which will be an absolute mark of Roman imperial coinage. Every time the Romans had success imposing their power in foreign lands, they would always show it on coins. And this is one of the first examples that set the precedent for what is going to become a tradition in Roman coinage. And we keep inching forward in time. Now we're around the year 1918 BC. Now Augustus fully adopted this new name. Now most of his coins bear the name Augustus, like how we have over here. Sometimes we see Caesar Augustus, but the name Augustus is going to stay. And look how interesting. Although it's a coin struck around this year, right, 19 BC, it is still talking about Julius Caesar. It's still talking about those important events from the 40s BC. What we can see over here is the Sidus Iulius, the star of Caesar. So what happened was right after Caesar died, and Octavian by then ensured that he was deified, that he became a god. By sheer coincidence, a comet passed through the skies and was visible in Rome. And of course, Augustus took the opportunity to connect this astronomical phenomena to a clear sign of the acceptance of Julius Caesar amongst the gods. So here we have a clear reference to Julius Caesar. So we have Divus Julius, means Julius Caesar had become a divus, he had become a new god, a new deified being, and we can see the star with the tail of the comet flowing upwards. Another very charming coin. And as you can notice, this coin is of a slightly different style. This is probably because this coin was not struck at Rome. This type is typically attributed to mints in Spain. Some people argue it was struck at what is now Cordoba. Others say this was at Caesar Augusta, what is Zaragoza. It's probably Caesar Augusta. But as you can see, it is quite a different style in the portrait. Lovely coin as well. Now here we have an example of a provincial coin of Augustus. This is a Christophorus. This is a nice big coin worth 4 drachma, probably around 12, 13 grams of very good silver. And this was struck at the important city of Pergamon on what is modern-day Turkey. It's a very famous type. It features the Sphinx. You can see here Augustus. So Augustus used the Sphinx as one of his main symbols. Apparently he had a signet ring that he used to sign documents, and he used the Sphinx as his symbol. We don't know exactly why. There might be some connections to his Eastern campaigns, his Eastern victories. There might be something to do with the conquest of Egypt as well, or simply the mythological symbol of the Sphinx. The Sphinx was a very destructive symbol. She was a fierce animal, very wise but very dangerous. So Augustus maybe wanted to maybe intimidate people whenever they saw documents signed by him, and you would see the little Sphinx in the seal. So something like "Don't mess with me," and it's probably a little bit. That was probably the case. It's probable that Augustus wanted to intimidate a little bit, because later in his reign, when the situation calms down and he's clearly well established in his rule and he doesn't have many enemies anymore, the Sphinx slowly disappears from his iconography, and it's replaced with more benign imagery. So it's probably the fact that he noticed that he was maybe exaggerating, he was being a little bit ruthless with the image he wanted to pass. So he slowly phased out the fierce Sphinx from this coin, which is a shame because it means that not a lot of coins bear the Sphinx, and it's absolutely spectacular. So unfortunately, this is the kind of coin that is extremely rare and shows this earlier way of doing politics of Augustus, not the illustrious one, but the absolutely ruthless Octavian that would kill Mark Antony, step over anyone who opposed them. It's really interesting to see this dangerous side of Augustus that people often forget about. People see him as this strategic genius, his great politician, but back then, for you to be a good politician, you had to have teeth, and he knew how to be a ruthless politician. So we're finally going to move out of the reign of Augustus. We're actually going to skip Tiberius, and we're going to go to Claudius. Good old Claudius. This is a wonderful aureus of him, as we can see. And first of all coins of Claudius, which aren't bronze, like his gold and silver coins, are incredibly rare, which makes this coin already super special. But the reverse makes this coin even more interesting because it talks about the Praetorian Guard. Now, the Praetorians were an elite force created they were created during the Republican period, but they were really established under Augustus. So we always talk about the Praetorians as being like these backstabbers. So the original idea was that they were this elite force under direct command of the emperor, and were supposed to not only take control of Rome, but take control of the political sphere of the empire overall, and of course to be the emperor's private main army of specialists. And they became very powerful because of that, and they had a very important fort right at the center of Rome. And every new emperor who wanted to become emperor had to be approved by the Praetorian Guard. So this is what we have over here. We see these little legends. We can see Imperator Recepto. This is a coin that celebrates the approval of Claudius as a new emperor by the Praetorians. So you can see a little Praetorian here next to the Aquila, the military standard of the troops, and he's over the walls of the Praetorian fort. You can see the battlements over here, the gates, and it's all this spectacular design, which this coin was probably gifted to a Praetorian to buy his allegiance, and this became a tradition. Every time a new emperor rose to the throne, quote unquote, he was supposed to give a very generous donation to the Praetorians, and they were supposed to accept him. Otherwise, it could happen what happened to many emperors, which the Praetorian Guard could pretty much kill you and replace you with someone else. Amazing coin. And here we have yet another wonderful aureus of Claudius. Now this one celebrates the conquest of Britain. This actually has a pretty interesting story behind it. You see, Claudius always had a problem of legitimacy. He was, of course, the circumstances that made him become emperor were quite weird, right? Before him, Caligula was emperor. And of course, Caligula was a terrible ruler and he was assassinated. And no one really thought much of Claudius before that. He was a bookworm. He always, stayed in his library. He preferred intellectual pursuits. He was actually very intelligent and people admired him for it. But he wasn't a very imposing figure. He stuttered a lot. He limped. He had some sort of deformity or some problem of mobility that he couldn't walk properly. And people didn't take him very seriously. But as Caligula died, he was killed, and Claudius became emperor, propped up by the Praetorians. He had to do things. He had to go the extra mile to be recognized, to be taken seriously. And one of the things he did was to invade and conquer Britain, the island of Britain, which all the way back in Julius Caesar's time was attacked by the Romans. Julius Caesar tried to conquest Britain, but was forced to retreat due to the campaign not being really feasible. It was too far away, it was too complicated. So Claudius completed this task, annexed the province, and especially as a way to garnish some legitimacy to himself. And here he is celebrating it with a wonderful triumphal arch. So you see De Victa Britannia, we see some military trophies, and the wonderful statue of Claudius saluting the crowd on top of his horse. Another amazing coin. Next, we go to the evil Nero, the successor of Claudius. Now, we can say whatever we want about how bad Nero was, but if there was one thing he did very well was issue coins. The coins of Nero are generally very well made. They're very realistic. As you can see over here, this coin was struck a little bit later in his reign, and you can see that he's getting quite fat, and he had no issue with the die engravers realistically portraying him gaining weight. Yet magnificent portrait where you can see all of the small details of his face, and it's really realistic. And on the reverse, we have a wonderful depiction of the port of Ostia. Now, Rome was, of course, this massive metropolis. Probably around the time of Nero, it was inching close to 1 million people. So it was a massive city. It needed to be fed. It needed to receive lots of supplies from all over the empire. And they had to come by ship. So Rome wasn't a coastal city. You had the Tiber River. The Tiber River went towards the sea. And right where the Tiber met the sea, there was the port city of Ostia. There was a major harbor there where all of these, as we can see here, these big cargo ships with shipments from all over the empire, or from metals from Spain, grain from Egypt, wood from whatever, all of these would be offloaded in Ostia, and they would either be brought up the Tiber to the city in smaller ships, which could go on the river, or they would be brought to the city with carts. So here we have this wonderful depiction of a circular harbor. We have the incarnation of the port itself here, relaxing next to the entrance of the port with a little dolphin by his side, quite lovely. You have here all of the piers and the parts where the boats would dock, and these wonderful depictions of ships which look surprisingly modern if we look at it. Like these look like the 16th century caravels and carracks that reached the New World. Wonderful coin. So while the previous coin of Nero showed the port of Ostia, very utilitarian and useful building for the well-being of the average Roman citizen, this Aureus shows the other side of Nero, the much more common megalomaniac side of Nero, because on the reverse over here we have an image of his Colossus, the Colossus of Nero. So what happened? In the year 64 AD, Rome was a huge part of Rome burned down due to this massive fire. We don't know exactly what caused the fire, but Nero, there's this story that Nero was playing with his harp while the city burned. This led to a horrible persecution of Christians, and instead of focusing his efforts on helping the population rebuild, Nero took the opportunity that now there was a lot of space right at the center of Rome, and he erected a massive palace called the Domus Aurea, the Golden Palace. And right next to it, he asked his artisans to make a massive gold statue of him as the sun god, because as we can see, he has a radiant crown behind his head. So this is a massive statue of Nero, which was supposed to stand right at the center of Rome, where he's seen holding a branch. He's holding a little victory, symbolizing his glory or whatever he meant. And this is a clear sign of the crazy, the evil Nero. This is a coin that fully encompasses this idea of this palace prince, this emperor who only cared about himself and was a little bit insane. An incredible example of an evil emperor. And Rome had many of them. Now, Nero went too far in his craziness, and he was, how may we put it, he was forced to commit suicide. And there was a brief period of civil war in 68 AD to see who would assume the position of emperor, since Nero had no heirs. So here we have one of the contenders. This was Galba. Galba was a very prominent politician, very prominent commander. He had commands in Spain, and he was called by the senatorial elites of Rome to come and take control of the empire, because he was considered maybe the most adept to take control of the situation and restore the situation to an institution more akin to what Augustus had originally planned. But what happened is that, well, Galba ended up not having enough military support to support his bid to power. because soon after he came to Rome, another contender, a man named Vitellius, would march from the northern frontiers of the empire with his own troops, and he would topple Galba. So in this case, we have this wonderful sesterces of Galba. You can see like very well, like Servilius, Galba Imperator, very dignified face of the emperor. Although we know that this was a little bit of a propaganda Photoshop. Galba was an elderly man and he suffered from quite a lot of illnesses, including gout. So he probably had a very deformed face. Poor man, he met a terrible end. He might have been a good emperor. And on the reverse, we see this image, this message of Galba trying to retain the, let's say, bring back the good times of Rome, because we see Rome seated in her throne with her spear and her shield right next to her, like ready to defend the Roman institutions. Wonderful image of the goddess, inspired on Greek portraits of a seated Athena, found on some coins of some Hellenistic kings, and wonderful coin. You can see some nice little details like the armor and the shield right next to her feet, like to symbolize the vanquished enemies. Little helmet as well. The SC for Senatus Consultu, and of course this wonderful Roma here down here, showing this was Dea Roma. Another incredible coin. Sadly, another very rare type of coin, not only for its condition and its style, but because Galba did not reign for a whole lot. He just reigned for some months before Vitellius came marching down and deposed the poor man. So yeah, sad reign, beautiful coin. So our next coin is from the winner of this civil war to see who would have the empire after the fall of Nero. And that was Vespasian. Here we have this wonderful portrait of Vespasian. He looks quite young in this portrait, actually. You know, most of the coins of Vespasian show him like he looks quite old, like all wrinkly and all. And I mean, it's not like he's a young boy in here, but he looks relatively fresh here, like middle-aged. Well, which makes sense. This coin was struck in his first year as emperor, so he wasn't that old. So as we can see in this aureus, Vespasian won the civil war. He's undeniably the new emperor. We can see here Vespasianus Augustus, and this is a rather special coin of his. So it celebrates the Roman victory, the Roman suppression of a revolt in the province of Judea against. So it was a revolt carried on by the Jewish subjects of the empire. And as we can see over here, he celebrates in this aureus the Roman victory over Judea. So we have a personification of the province of Judea, of the Jewish people, as this mourning woman sitting on the floor weeping. You can see she's reaching to her face. She has a veiled head, probably in mourning over her fellow countrymen who rebelled and were killed by the legionaries. To her left, there's a military trophy. This was a tradition from the Greeks that the Romans adopted, which was to, in the site of a battle, in this case in Jerusalem, they would gather the arms and armor, the best pieces of looted equipment from the defeated enemies, and they would make a trophy, like this beautiful trophy, and they would offer it to Jupiter, and especially to Mars, the god of war. And we can see over here at the lower part, Judea, showing this was the defeated province. Now here is one of my favorite coins of the collection, and it has to do with this dramatic color. Like, what is going on with this coin? Now, this is yet another gold aureus of Vespasian. We can see here his portrait once again. And what the hell is going on with this coin? Check out these colors. These like rainbow toning thing over gold, which is very weird because, as you see, Base metals and silver, they do suffer corrosion. They react to the chemicals in the environment. Silver to a lesser degree. But gold is very inert. Gold is not supposed to tone like this. So what happened to this coin? You see, one of the things that happened during Vespasian's reign, right at the end, at 79 AD, was the famous eruption of the Vesuvius, a volcano that buried the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. So, next to the volcano, there was a vineyard. This vineyard was completely covered by volcanic ash, and in 1895, a hoard of hundreds of gold ore like this one was uncovered. So the combination of the sulfur and all of these very specific chemicals from the volcanic ash over the gold created this incredible toning over the gold, which means this coin, not only it is spectacular visually, but it comes from Pompeii. It comes from Pompeii. It's incredible. These coins are called, they come from a hoard which is called Bosco Reale. Bosco Reale was the region where it was found. So whenever you see a gold coin with this toning, it comes from that hoard. It's incredible. It means that it is not only it's a spectacular gold coin, gold Roman aureus, but it comes from Pompeii, from the time when it was buried by the Vesuvius eruption. Imagine how incredible this would have been. I mean, other coins from the collection also come from this Bosco Reale hoard, like the Judea Capta also came from this hoard. You can see a little bit of the patina over here, but and the trophy as well, but nothing like this absolutely dramatic toning over here. And I mean, imagine that. Imagine having a coin that not only it's cool by itself, but you know that this coin was once in the possession of one of the Romans who were escaping the eruption of the Vesuvius. Absolutely incredible. I think this is one of my favorite coins of this collection, if not the favorite, just for the historical context of it. Now, for this next coin, the coin not only is interesting because of the things we can see in it, but actually due to who owned it. So between the 17th and 18th century, there was this scholar called Apostolo Zeno, and he was from Venice, and he was one of the first serious scholars to study and to catalog ancient coins. He mainly collected Roman coins, but he also collected Greek, Byzantine coins, and his collection is one of the oldest properly recorded collections. So it's one of those examples of like a coin's second life being as interesting as its first life when it was money. Like, not only this coin is very interesting, I mean, it shows in the reverse, the temple of Vesta, where the Vestal virgins kept the sacred fire that protected Rome, always lit. It was a very important place where a lot of records were kept. So not only this coin has a lot of significance in it, showing Vespasian's more pious side as he was the chief priest of the Roman religion, but as I said, right, this is an interesting example of a coin that has two lives. One ancient life as ancient propaganda, where it was meant to show this pious side of Vespasian's reign. Here we can see this quite older portrait of him. Now he can see his skin is starting to sag away and all. And we can see this wonderful temple with a couple of statues right next to it. It could also be the Vestal virgins taking care of the temple, but also this, right? The coin itself has a story of people who owned it. Like, imagine in the 17th century, someone collecting coins, and this coin being passed from generation to generation, from collector to collector, and then reaching your collection. That's amazing. like my personal oldest provenance is from the beginning of the 20th century, and I was already impressed. But imagine having a coin from the 1700s, from the 1800s. Imagine how incredible would that be. And this is one of such cases. And I mean, look at what we have here. This is another one of the most important Roman imperial coins ever struck. We're talking about a commemorative coin featuring the Colosseum. This is what we have here, the Flavian Amphitheater in all of its glory, when the coin struck pretty much the year when it was of its inauguration. Imagine how incredible. This coin circulating when the Colosseum was open. We can actually see some of the details of the Colosseum. You can see like it was made in this like forced perspective way. So you see like the frontal area of the Colosseum, it looks a little bit flatter, so we can see the details like the arches, the tiny little statues in each of the arches, the lots of arches. The top row, it is actually closed off. So this part would probably have been made out of wood because there was a system of pulleys in place where it would cover the arena when it was raining to protect people from the sun. And then we can see the interior of the Colosseum full of people in here enjoying the gladiatorial matches. Emperor Titus would have been somewhere here in the middle enjoying the show. Amazing. Here to the side we have one of the obelisks. Over here we also have a temple that was erected by Titus to commemorate the spoils of war, especially after I was showing the Judea Capta, like the lots of construction projects, including the Colosseum, were funded by the spoils of war against the Jews from the first Jewish revolt. And on the reverse, we actually have a full body image of Titus sitting on a curule chair, the chair used by consuls. So he was a consul that year, and he has an olive branch symbolizing peace, symbolizing Roman victory. And right next to him, a little bit contradicting to the idea of peace, you have lots of shields, pieces of armor, once again making a reference to the vanquished Jewish revolt and the spoils of war that were used to finance the construction of this magnificent monument. Incredible, right? And around it we have once again the Caesar, Vespasianus, Augustus, basically the regnal titles of Titus. Incredible. Imagine having one of these coins. And if 2 coins of the Bosco Reale hoard weren't enough, we have a third one. Here we have Domitian. Actually, this coin wasn't struck when Domitian was emperor. This was when he was still a Caesar under Titus, under his younger brother. So we see Domitianus Caesar Augustus Filius, so it's mentioning he was son of Vespasian. And on the reverse, look how wonderful. We have the founding myth of Rome. We have the she-wolf feeding the 2 young Romulus and Remus who would eventually fight. One would kill the other, and then Romulus would found Rome. And here we have an inscription, Consul for the 5th year, showing that Domitian, despite being still a Caesar, despite being still a young man, he was experienced and he had what it took to assume the throne after Vespasian and after Titus died. Wonderful coin. Look how it is made in this very large flange, so you have this excess material around the beading, which gives the coin this, I don't know, it gives this nicer look. You know, I love coins which have this excess material around it. And of course, on the obverse, we have this absolutely insane rainbow toning with these tones of pink and purple and maybe even a little bit of green around here, something only achievable in these very specific sulfuric circumstances and atmosphere where this hoard was deposited. It's just incredible coin after incredible coin. I know I'm repeating myself here. I'm like, every coin is awesome. But yes, every coin is amazing. And for the next coin, we're gonna get out of Rome and we're gonna head all the way to Egypt. Now, as you can see, this coin looks quite different to the other coins we've seen before. That is because Egypt had a completely separate and insulated monetary standard. So Egypt issued its own coins, it had its own monetary standard. No foreign coins could get inside of Egypt, no Egyptian coins could leave Egypt, they all had to be exchanged at the border. This was actually a strong source of revenue for the Roman state. And as we can see, Egypt also had its own local designs put on coins. And this is nothing less than the Sphinx, the famous Sphinx next to the pyramids, here in all its glory. You can see this wonderful headdress. It still has its nose. If you've been to the pyramid nowadays, not the pyramids. If you've visited the Sphinx, you will know that she doesn't have her nose anymore. And the Romans were actually fascinated with Egypt. The Romans really enjoyed, they respected, it's a better term, old cultures, even if they might consider some of their customs maybe barbaric, or they wanted to impose Romanization in wherever they went. If you had an old culture, especially if it was older than the Romans typically respected your culture very much. And that was the case of Egypt. Egypt was considered very venerable, the Romans really enjoyed Egypt. And as you can see, they really took a lot of effort to show these images and these symbols of Egypt in Egyptian coinage, which is pretty fascinating. And then we get to the 2nd century AD, my personal favorite time of Roman history, because it was the golden age of Rome. It was the time the empire was at its strongest, its borders were the most stable. The Roman army was probably the undisputed champion, at least of Europe and this area. And we begin with an aureus of Emperor Trajan, the Optimus Princeps. This coin was struck probably between 112, 115, so towards the end of Trajan's reign. And it was, as you can see here on the reverse, it was issued to celebrate Trajan's most important architectural project in Rome, his Forum Traianum, Trajan's Forum. So Trajan had a lot of military victories, and one of his most important ones, probably the most important one, was against the Dacians. Now, the Dacians had their territory had lots of gold and silver mines, and this, of course, led to a massive economic boom to the empire. Not only the slaves that were captured, but all of that gold and silver was put to use, making lots of renovations and new public buildings in Rome, and one of them was the Forum Traianum. Some parts of it are still visible today. The base of the Forum is still visible in Rome. Of course, Trajan's Column, which was a central part of the Forum complex, is still visible. It survives to this day. It's another famous monument. And this was a massive forum. Rome had never seen such a space. It had libraries, it had spaces for meetings, it had a massive temple dedicated to Trajan himself. It was spectacular. It was full of, as we can see here on the top, it was full of gilded statues celebrating Trajan's conquests, his successful battles. So it was really something not seen at any. It was something like anything seen before, and it's one of the reasons why Trajan is called the Optimus Princeps, because people were so impressed with the achievements he managed to accomplish and the amount of gold and silver and prosperity he brought to Rome, that they were like, okay, no one since Augustus was such a good emperor like you. It's really impressive. So as we can see here, we have the triumphal bust of Trajan looking very serious, very dignified with his draperies over. We can see a little bit of his cuirass. And Since I haven't read any of the legends up to now, I think we can read this one, right? Trajan loved his titles. He loved to put very long legends on his coins. So here we can see Imperator Trajanus Augustus, so Emperor Trajan, the Emperor Augustus, Germanicus, vanquisher of the Germans, Dacicus, vanquisher of the Parthians, and then we have some of his official titles. Pontifex Maximus, chief priest, Tribunicia Potestate, with powers of a tribune, Cos, six times consul, Pater Patriae, father of the nation. And this isn't even the longest title I've seen. There's some even longer titles for Trajan. He really loved to squeeze every single bit of propaganda he could on coins. Another spectacular coin. Now I'm getting excited. We're going to get into 2nd century Rome, and it's the time of coinage I particularly love. Now, Trajan didn't only make propaganda on his gold coins, he actually also put his propaganda on bronze coins for the common people of Rome. And this is one of such examples. Here we have the Temple of Jupiter, one of the oldest temples around the area of the Forum, one of the most ancient temples of Rome. And he was yet another emperor to, using the spoils of war from the war against the Dacians, to renovate this forum. So it was yet another one of his grandiose projects to make Rome incredible with all of these spoils of war. And of course, he was going to put it on coins so everyone could see. And remember, I talked about everyone considering him the optimo principe, like the best emperor since Augustus. He actually puts his titles on this coin. We can read on the reverse, Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome, optimo principi. So the best emperor of the Senate and the people of Rome. That's a massive ego, right? I mean, Trajan could have a massive ego. He was a very successful emperor. And as a curiosity, notice how on every bronze coin we have this SC over here, which stands for Senatus Consulto, by decree of the Senate, because these coins did not have any precious metal value into them, but they were part of the monetary standard. So you could exchange these coins, which did not have intrinsic value, for coins of intrinsic value, denarii and auri. So this SC means that by law, this coin had its equivalent value in precious metal. So that's why you see this SC in base metal coins, and you don't typically see it in precious metal coins because these coins have precious metal value on themselves. Another fantastic coin. Don't collect only silver and gold coins if you have the means. Keep an eye open for bronze coins as well, especially because they typically have broader flans. So as you can see over here, like even if this was a small denomination, if this was kind of like pocket change, it's still a pretty fantastic coin. It still has a very good looking portrait of Trajan. And actually, coins of base metal in such good condition like this one can get quite pricey, can get more expensive than silver denarii for sure, because they're usually found very worn, very corroded. So if you have a good looking bronze coin in a high grade of conservation, they can get quite pricey. Okay, so we leave the reign of Trajan and we enter the reign of Hadrian. This is yet another coin from Egypt, from Alexandria. In this case, it's a drachma. So these were massive coins. This was the site of the sesterces. And notice how different it looks, the style of the coin looks in relation to the coin struck at Rome. If we go for the Trajan coin for a moment, you can see that the style is quite different. I mean, we can even compare it to another coin of Hadrian, which we will look in a second. Rome has this very realistic portraiture, while Egypt, I mean, this one is actually pretty good, but still, we have this more stylized, more Eastern style on a coin. It's still fantastic. These coins have also like a higher relief compared to those of Rome, so it's pretty fantastic. And the legends are in Greek as well. But what matters for this particular coin, although this is a lovely bust, it's the reverse, because we have nothing less than one of the wonders of the ancient world. This is the lighthouse of Alexandria. So we have lots of descriptions of what the lighthouse looked like. Apparently it was this massive tower with 4 sides, and it had a massive statue of Helios at the top with some smaller statues next to it. So here we have a whole series of coins from Egypt that show the lighthouse, so it actually gives us some very interesting clues of what the original structure looked like, because of course it doesn't exist anymore. It was the last records of some of its ruins come from the 15th century, and even all the way back then it was already in a pretty sorry state. And we can see to the left of the lighthouse, we can see the incarnation of Alexandria itself, of the city of Alexandria, and she has a sail on her hand, and as you can see, the wind is blowing the fabrics of her dress and blowing this sail she's holding to symbolize that the harbor of Alexandria had a lot of wind. It was a place of commerce, a place where where merchandise circulated. Amazing, wonderful coin. So as I was mentioning, here is once again the coin the Aureus struck also under Hadrian, but in this case it was struck at Rome. However, on the reverse, we have once again a connection to Egypt, because this is the incarnation of the river Nile. This is the incarnation of the river Nile. So you can see this very, very bulky man. Maybe he's got a bit of a belly over here. It's actually funny, the depictions of river gods, sometimes they're very muscular, very strong. The Nile, however, the Nile was so productive. It produced so much grain, so much food, that quite often you see the Nile being shown like a little bit chubby, a little bit like with some excess fat, like giving this idea of like this land was so prosperous, it was so rich that even the god that represented the area had a little bit of an excess because the area produced just so much food. It's very charming. So in any case, we see the god of the river here. He's relaxing over the Sphinx. Check this out. The Sphinx we've seen in the previous coin, he is resting his arm over the head of the Sphinx. It's fantastic. So we have the waves of the river Nile. We have a little crocodile over here and a little hippo over here. So 2 very common animals to see in the shores of the river. And of course, he carries the cornucopia, the horn of abundance, the symbol of abundance, of wealth, of production, of agriculture. And as you can see, like we have fruits and we have grain and we have an unending stream of food and delicious things coming out of the horn. Fantastic. And once again, here on the obverse, we have this wonderful portrait of Hadrian with the Hadrianus Augustus Consul Tertium Pater Patriae. Much shorter legends compared to those of Trajan. Sadly, Hadrian has a very sad story between him and the Nile, because Hadrian had a favorite, we could call it a boyfriend and maybe a favorite, a man called Antinous, that he loved him very much, and we don't know what happened, if this was the case of death of despair, how may I put it so YouTube doesn't censor this video, but Antinous died in the waters of the Nile. And some records say that Hadrian was absolutely devastated about the loss of his loved one all of a sudden in a situation like this as they were cruising the Nile. So yes, pretty significant coin, and I'm pretty sure whenever Hadrian thought about Egypt, he would have thought about the memory of his loved Antinous. And here is my favorite emperor of all of the emperors, Antoninus Pius, probably the most boring of all Roman emperors. And why is he my favorite Roman emperor? Because of the fact that there's not a lot of records about this man. There's something good about historians not writing a whole lot about your time period, your reign, because it means that no big events happen, no big wars happen, no big famines happened. There were a couple of revolts here and there, a couple of military engagements, but overall, the very long reign of Antoninus Pius of 23 years, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, his reign was from 138 to 161, if I'm not mistaken. And these were very peaceful years. Rome was safely under control of its empire. Harvests were plentiful. The empire was at peace. The Roman armies were uncontested. The frontiers were somewhat under control. So that's what makes Antoninus awesome. He was a benign emperor. He didn't do anything crazy. He kept things working smoothly. So he was a boring emperor. Maybe one could say he should have acted preemptively in some things that would become issues later down the line. But can we blame him? Can we blame Antoninus for just keeping things that were working well? So in any case, we have here his name, Antoninus Augustus Pius Pater Patriae, this lovely portrait of him without the laurel wreath, quite interesting. Hadrian and Antoninus have a lot of portraits without the typical laurel wreath of the emperor. And on the reverse, quite unusual for a coin of Antoninus, we have Mars, we have the god of war with a trophy and a spear, which is, as I said, like unusual for such a peaceful emperor. I mean, there were some events where there was some fighting all the way up in Britannia next to Hadrian's wall. Actually, Antoninus built another wall further up the island, but it didn't last very long, and he had to send a couple of threatening messages to the Parthians so they would not encroach on Roman territory. There was also maybe a little bit of a problem in Egypt, but overall very peaceful reign. So it's quite interesting to see like this marching image of Mars ready to battle, ready to go to battle in a coin of a very peaceful emperor. Frankly, one of my numismatic dreams is to have a Roman aureus in my personal collection. And if I had to pick one emperor to represent this denomination in my collection, it would have been Antoninus Pius. Hopefully one day I will have an aureus in my collection. Maybe not as spectacular as this one, maybe not in such good condition as this one, but I'll get there. And for our next coin, we're jumping Marcus Aurelius and we're going to Commodus, the bastard who ended the wonderful golden age of Rome. So as you know, Commodus wasn't a particularly good emperor. He had quite a big ego, but he wasn't nearly as competent as Trajan. He wanted more to be seen in the gladiatorial matches, playing rigged matches rather than actually take care of the issues that the empire had, which during his reign were many. There was a plague, there were new wars at the frontier, but he reigned for a relatively long 12 years before they got rid of him. And after Commodus was dead, there was this yet another bloody civil war to see who would become emperor. So in any case, we have this fairly nice looking bust of Commodus here. The quality of his coins, the portraits, typically devolve during his reign, but this one still looks pretty good. So you can see this very nice bearded portrait of him. We can see Marcus, Commodus Antoninus Augustus, and then Britannicus, conqueror of the Britons, and Felix. And on the reverse, we have the Ad Locutio. The Ad Locutio was a ceremony held by the emperor to his troops, particularly to the Praetorian Guard. So this was celebration of the unity between the emperor and the troops. So as you can see here, we see Commodus raising his hand in the imperial salute to his troops. The troops are all in battle armor and carrying the standards. So he's renewing his vows to his troops. And as you can see here, we have Fides Exercitus, so the fealty, the fidelity of the army. So it's basically a coin meant to symbolize Commodus was in good terms with the troops. Very likely this was one of the coins given to the troops to buy their loyalty. This was one of the main ways to buy the loyalty of your soldiers. And once again, we have the titles that Commodus held around the legends. So we have Pontifex Maximus, Tribunicia Potestate for the 13th year. Oh no, in this case for the 10th year. This is Imperator. Imperator, leader of troops. So he wanted to show to the troops, even in the legends, that he was a commander. So we have Imperator for the 7th year and Consul for the 4th year, Pater Patriae. Lovely reverse. I love the little dots that the engraver put on the little box, the little stand that Commodus is on, just to decorate and fill out the design a little bit more. Terrible guy, but amazing coin. And with this lovely sestertius, we entered the 3rd century, in particular the early 3rd century, when the Severan dynasty was in charge. So here we have a sestertius of Emperor Caracalla, and I'm gonna get to the obverse in a minute, but we really need to talk about the reverse, because this is amazing. What we have here is another perspective view of a very important monument in Rome. In this case, it's the Circus Maximus. So this incredibly large arena where they would, well, do lots of spectacles, but especially chariot racing, which was one of the main sporting events in Rome. You can still visit the Circus Maximus, although there's very little of the structure left. There's just some parts in the entrance, and it's pretty much an empty space nowadays, but it used to be massive. While the Colosseum could hold something like 50,000 people, the Circus Maximus could hold 200,000. So it was much easier to get in. The events that would happen there would be much grander in scope. Lots of people preferred chariot racing rather than the gladiatorial matches. So it was also another pretty important monument that gets overshadowed by the Colosseum. And as we can see, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on here, right? Because it was a very important monument. So it wasn't just a stadium. It was a place where Rome showcased its conquests. As we can see over here in the center, you see lots of these objects. You see an obelisk here at the center. All of these were like objects captured by Rome and brought to Rome to be exposed in the Circus Maximus. So every time there was a chariot race or any kind of public event there were these important monuments displaying Rome's history and pretty much a massive display of Roman power. And as we can see over here, apart from the massive stands where you would have 200,000 people, you have lots of arches, lots of annexed structures that were, as the centuries went on, like annexed to the whole complex, which is the case of this coin. This coin was struck in 213 AD under the early reign of Caracalla, and it celebrates renovation of the Circus Maximus. So it was sort of like reopened in even grander style and pomp. And Caracalla is, with this coin, celebrating the event because it was a major monument for every Roman. And as we can see here on the obverse, we have this very serious, very regal portrait of Caracalla. Caracalla was not to be messed with. Although in most coins he has this very angry expression, over here he looks slightly more relaxed. He still looks quite fierce. You wouldn't want to mess with him, but he doesn't look as angry as in some of my coins. And still, a coin struck in lovely detail. Notice this yellowish toning that covers the coin. Very interesting toning that developed over here. This is probably a result of a mixture of copper and lead. By this time, the sestertius was not really issued in brass anymore. There are some coins in brass which probably were recycled from early sestertii, but here we probably have a coin which is made of ice plumbatum, which is a mixture of lead and copper, and amazing coin. And even more impressive to add to this coin, apart from the design being incredible and showing so much of the Circus Maximus, this coin once belonged to a prime minister of Great Britain in the 18th century. Another one of these incredibly impressive pieces of provenance in this collection. So yeah, a very nice way to start the 3rd century with a coin featuring another major monument of Rome. And for the next coin, we're actually gonna stop and go back in time just a little bit, a few years before that earlier sestertius was struck. This coin is also struck in the name of Caracalla. Here we can see a much younger bust of the emperor, but this coin was actually struck under his father, Septimius Severus. Caracalla was his co-emperor, as we can see here, Pius Augustus, representing that he was indeed an emperor, but of course he was a junior emperor. He wasn't really meant to rule or anything. Septimius had the real power. It was just that he had the title of emperor to show himself as the natural successor in line. And once again, this is a coin that calls attention for its reverse. Look at this incredible portrait of the Medusa, this legendary creature that would transform you into a statue, make you out of stone if it looked at you. And interestingly, despite, like, typically the Medusa is depicted as this ugly creature, like scary looking, but here she looks okay. She looks rather cute. She doesn't look very threatening, right? You can actually barely see the serpents. You can see her, like, her hair falling down here, a couple of wings on her head, and only if you pay really close attention, you notice the snakes coming out of her head. So it's interesting. It's a gracious image, but at the same time you notice that it is dangerous. It's interesting. It's very fitting for the Severian dynasty, because these guys came into power after a civil war, yet another civil war after the fall of Commodus, but their reign, the entire Severian dynasty, their rule had a much different vibe compared to the emperors of the 2nd century. While the emperors of the 2nd century were this sort of like elective monarchy where the best emperor was chosen amongst the elite of Rome, the Severians were an imperial family. They were hereditary rulers. They were much more autocratic than their predecessors. So they had to show their might. They had to be much more overt in their shows of power. And here we have one of such examples. So you can see, like, the Medusa, it's threatening, but in a more veiled way, you know? And if we notice the legends around here, Providentia, the providence, the divine providence, it's interesting. It's a way to show that the rule of the Severians, the fact they rose to prominence, they rose to power through violence, and they kept it by being this unrelenting force in an unstable political environment, was a work from the gods. It's very interesting. It's a very subtle way of projecting their force, which it's at the same time it's very fitting of the Severians because they rose to power through violence, but it's also a little bit more discreet, you know, due to the Medusa. Another interesting thing I see here in this portrait is, well, it's not much in the political sense of the message, but it's actually in the aesthetics of Medusa as well. So here we have this 3/4 facing portrait. Now, this was very hard to make with hand tools to engrave the dies. This was the fruit of a very skilled engraver. These portraits were very hard to make. The dies had to be carved they had to be carved much deeper, so it was a difficult die to make, and you get the right proportions. So this is a work of a very skilled artist. And not only that, there's a major issue with these facing portraits in the way that they're very ephemeral. What do I mean by this? Which are the highest points of this portrait? It's probably the nose, the mouth, some parts of the hair, especially the high points of the hair. So the moment a coin like this one circulated a little bit, you would immediately start distorting the nose, distorting the mouth, and you would immediately get this very ugly portrait, very distorted right in the nose and the mouth. So that's why we don't see a lot of facing portraits. They're not very time resistant. They get ugly with just a little bit of circulation, and the Romans didn't want that. They want their message to be circulating on the coins for as long as possible. And so to see a coin like this, still in such a pretty much uncirculated shape, it has a few scratches here and there, but you can see that this coin probably did not circulate at all, or it had very minor circulation, because we still have a little bit, like the nose is still pretty much intact. The lips don't show any sign of deformation due to wear. So yeah, this is a wonderful coin, and I hope the owner of the collection treats this coin with lots of care, because this portrait is very ephemeral. It's a little bit of wear, it starts getting ugly. So yeah, another wonderful coin. And for our next aureus, we have a piece from Julia Domna, probably one of my favorite empresses, because she was, just to contextualize, she was the wife of Septimius Severus, the mother of Caracalla, who was in the 2 coins we saw earlier. And I like her because, so the Severan dynasty, it's mostly about very authoritarian characters. They were like Caracalla and Septimius especially, they were men of the military, they ruled by force and force alone almost, while Julia Domna gave this more civic approach to the whole imperial family. She gave a lot of legitimacy with the Roman elites. She was an intellectual. She was always in the intellectual circles. And this is one of such coins that illustrates this. She is seen over here in the Temple of Vesta. Once more, we can see Vesta over here. Once again, a very important temple for Roman religion. And she's sacrificing in a fire altar right next to the Vestal virgins, the virgins that were responsible for taking care of the temple and of the eternal fire that burned inside of it. So as a result, Julia, she was that character that gave this civic side to the Severan dynasty. She was very intellectually oriented. She accompanied her husband on his military campaigns, so she was very well liked by the troops. She was seen. I would guess a lot of people back in their time, I would guess they saw her as a civilizing force amongst the men of the Severan dynasty. So yeah, she's very interesting. She's a very interesting character. Quite a few things have been written about her. She's a very well-documented empress, and it's an empress that, you don't need to collect fantastic-looking ori like these ones. Denarii of her are very easy to find, very affordable, and it's an empress not a lot of people know about, and people should pay more attention to her, because she's a very interesting woman indeed. And now we go to one of the most colorful characters of the Severan dynasty, Elagabalus. Elagabalus was native from the eastern part of the empire, from Syria. He was also part of the Severan dynasty, and he was brought to Rome and made emperor after the death of Caracalla, the violent death of Caracalla. And he really deserves an episode for him, like a dedicated episode, because there are lots of things written about him, none of them very flattering. We don't know which are true. Some say he was very effeminate, others say he directly was a cross-dresser. He offered himself to gladiators and to any masculine-looking senators who tickled his fancy. But all of that aside, one of the most remarkable things about Elagabalus was his religious religious practices. He was, back when he lived in the eastern provinces, he was a priest of a cult of a sun god. And that's why he has this name Elagabalus, because he was the priest of the god El Gabal, as we can read here. And they worshipped, in this cult, they worshipped a sacred stone. Some say it was a meteorite. So when he became emperor, as we can see here in this reverse, he brought this meteor, this sacred stone, to Rome in this massive parade, and this massive, with lots of pomp. He brought this stone to Rome, and he wanted to remake the entire Roman religion that had been established for such a long time. He wanted to remake all of that in dedication to his personal sun god, as we can see here, Sancto Deo Soli, the holy god Sol. And of course, the Roman aristocracy did not like this one bit. He was a very disruptive character, not only because of his personal habits, so to speak, but his religious practices were completely against all of Roman tradition. This was not something to be trifled with, and he wanted to completely revolutionize it. And it was probably one of the main reasons why his own grandmother took him off. He had a very short reign, just like 4 years, and then he was taken care of by the Praetorian Guard because he was being too disruptive with Roman customs. Now, this next coin, it is not interesting per se for the coin itself, although this is a lovely example of Maximinus, the son of an usurper turned emperor. But what I want to call your attention to this coin is this little symbol over here. Quite funny, right? Of course, if you look at this coin, especially with the patina, you might come to the conclusion that this is not part of the original manufacture of the coin, right? And you would be right. What happens about this coin is, this is one of these coins where its second life as a collectible is more interesting than the stories it tells us from back when it was money. So this coin comes from a collection from the 15th century. A noble family from Ferrara collected coins. These coins have a long recorded history throughout history. Imagine that, 5 centuries of history amongst collections, European collections. And one of the ways they marked the coins from being from this collection was by adding this little inlay, it's actually a little eagle. So they added this little silver eagle to the coin to mark that it was part of the collection. And it's incredible. Imagine having a coin that you know has been shifting hands between collectors for 5 centuries. So these coins, every once in a while, these coins do show up with this marking them from being from this collection. And of course, this is a situation where the provenance gives the coin a massive premium over a coin of similar type. I mean, a coin from Maximinus, from the father of Maximinus Thrax, is already an expensive coin because the coins from this Caesar are rare. But to have such a provenance, this is one of the cases where this coin is it's basically unique for its provenance. And since this episode is turning out to be a little bit too long, let's finish up with Constantine, right at the end of the Roman Empire in the 4th century. So this is, I mean, the coins of Constantine are very common, but this is absolutely not a common coin. This is a medallion. A medallion was a special coin. It was considered a coin because it had precious metal content in it, and it was struck in a certain weight that was multiple of what a typical denomination would be. But of course, this is the kind of piece, that's how we could call it. I wouldn't just call it a coin, that was given to dignitaries, diplomats, important generals, and in all of these during important occasions. And here, as we can see on the reverse, this is a commemorative medallion for the foundation of Constantinople, the city refounded by Constantine over the site of the old Byzantium. And as we can see here on the reverse, we have the incarnation of this new Constantinople. So we have the image of the seated goddess that represented the city. She has on her head a set of walls, a crown made out of the walls of the city, which were the first set of walls erected by Constantine. She has on her hand a big cornucopia representing the prosperity of the city, and she has close to her feet a little prow of a ship, because it was, of course, a coastal city, a very important commercial harbor. So she has her feet over a little ship to represent the coastal importance of the city. Also, lovely throne over here, and we have the legends in a Greek style. I love this. If we look at it sideways, Dominus Noster, Constantinus, Maximus Augustus. It's similar to what a typical coin of Constantine would look like, but it was sculpted in a way that is similar to a Hellenistic coin, to a Greek coin. So it's very interesting. It's a Roman coin. It has a portrait of Constantine that is reasonably similar to what you would find in one of his common coins, but it has this classical Hellenistic style. It is clearly inspired on coins from previous centuries. So it's this lovely mix of Roman style, late Roman style, and a certain Greekness from centuries prior. So it's a lovely way to wrap up this little podcast. So I hope you enjoyed it. I will make another episode on the Colosseo collection of Greek coins. I will be releasing it soon. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to head out to the Colosseo Collection to look at these lovely coins with taking your time and appreciating them and looking at them in full high resolution, because it's a really amazing collection. And as you can see, he does a wonderful way of curating the collection from the earlier, from the end of the Republic, and then he goes on this journey throughout the centuries, throughout Roman history, until, as we can see here, the in this case the 4th century, sort of like the beginning of the end of the Roman Empire. So fantastic collection. Thank you very much for the owner. I hope he's watching this video, for letting me comment and show this collection. And yeah, go check the Colosseo collection. See you soon.